Meghan's talent was to conceal the dramas. At the end of the Invictus Games, she made a compassionate speech praising the competitors for stealing the show and her heart. Using her theatrical skill, her references to humanity and motherhood even touched the veteran royal photographer Arthur Edwards. He said, "I've been smitten with Meghan. She was absolutely brilliant." Oh, Meghan. I fail to understand how so many people can be smitten by her when what she says is so often paltry and unimportant. She uses way too many platitudes and cliches to be interesting. Everything that comes out of her mouth is artificial intelligence. It's not anything that should make anyone feel ways about anything. Well, though Australia had been a smashing success, when they left Australia, things began to go south quick. And this is a story I was telling you guys about, how I knew a lot of the bad things that had gone on in England, but I didn't know about these things that had gone on during the Australian tour. The mood began to change after the couple arrived in Fiji. By any reckoning, the brief stop on their way to New Zealand should have been uneventful. Just as in Australia, Meghan had requested to speak to groups of women and students. Unlike previous meetings, her address at the University of the South Pacific was reported. And in this talk, she gives the students this really self-serving little speech that is very typical of somebody like her. She tells them that she knows how hard it is to get an education and how hard it is to get higher education. She knows because she herself had to fight this battle herself. Through work study, through getting a job on campus, and by scrimping and pinching, she was able to put herself through college. And she knows that that story is probably theirs as well. But it was worth every penny. Well, because this is one of the few talks that was recorded, Thomas Markle got wind of it and he was infuriated. So, of course, he's got to take to his media friends and let them know that this couldn't be farther from the truth and that he had paid for every cent of Meghan's education. Moreover, he had the receipts to prove that she'd never given him any money towards the debts that he was now still working on. And that even when she got on Suits, she didn't bother to help him with the bills. So, for Meghan to come out and tell this whopper was an absolute slap in his face. And of course, Meghan doesn't feel like there's ever going to be anything for her to worry about because she has cut her dad off. So it doesn't matter if he's over there fuming in Mexico. It won't ever touch her. There won't ever be any consequence to this big lie. In Thomas's indignation, he came out saying the truth about the college bills, but then he goes a step further, and then this is what always happens with Thomas. He does many things right, but then he does one thing that is so wrong that it overshadows the right that he did. He says that he never took a penny from Meghan, and Tom Bauer is generous when he says that Markle just mistakenly reported that he'd never taken a penny from Meghan because Meghan had the receipts to show that she'd given him $20,000. So she didn't appreciate what he was saying, and she came out and made sure that people knew about that. And so it sort of overshadowed his claims about how he'd paid for all of her college. Still true, he did, and I think he's still paying for it, actually. But if only he could not have made that last point, it would have made his point that much greater. Now, this is where things go off the rails in spectacular fashion. Listen here. While she was in Fiji, unaware of her father's latest outburst, Meghan decided to have one of her own. Now, she was taken to this bustling Fijian street market for a 15-minute stop. Okay, that's all she had to get through, just 15 minutes. Now, she showed up in a 1,494-pound silk dress. And as she is being shown about the market in her crazy expensive dress, and while she's only got 15 minutes to get through, she notices that most of the women in the crowd are wearing t-shirts that say UN Women. The rage that fills her heart when she's reminded of her former inability to scale up in that establishment makes her so angry that she cannot go on. Within minutes, Meghan was unhappy. Many of the locals were wearing t-shirts emblazoned with the slogan UN Women. She had been brought to a project sponsored by her old organization. Unforgiving that Elizabeth Nyamiyaro had refused to promote her to be an ambassador, Meghan berated Amy Pickrell for arranging the visit. Pickrell retreated to the official car where she was later seen, according to the Daily Mail's Rebecca English, with tears running down her face. Rebecca says, "Our eyes met, and she lowered hers, humiliation etched on her features." 8 minutes after arriving, Meghan declared she was leaving. She wasn't going to stay for this, absolutely not, and it's ridiculous that anyone would expect her to. Hundreds of women expressed their disappointment, though Meghan claimed that she had to leave because the crowd was oppressive and the humidity was too much for her, and it all just threatened her security. No one was buying that, and they were just so shocked that she wouldn't have stayed longer. Think about how fast 8 minutes would have gone by before she's already getting into her car. 15 minutes as it wasn't too much to ask. She couldn't have just pulled it together for 15 minutes. Why in the world does she think that she can just tell Amy Pickrell that this is some kind of a terrible experience? She used that UN Women line for as long as she could. As long as she wasn't with the royals, she claimed to have been with that association and that organization. And she used it for her own benefit time and time again. It was on her resume way after they had let her go. So how was Amy supposed to know that that wasn't still something she was proud about? Probably Amy selected this event for the very reason that it involved the UN Women, thinking that this would be something that would really spark interest for Meghan. No wonder she was crying. What a disappointment. What a shock to be berated for something that you thought you were doing, that you were giving a gift to the other person, that they could see what their old organization was up to. Not only was Amy Pickrell devastated by what had happened, but by the time the entourage returned to their hotel, the female Metropolitan Police protective officer had decided to resign on her return to Britain. Do you remember how Harry had gotten Meghan a personal security guard who was a woman? Well, that lady can't take it anymore. She's out. So yet another staff member, another person hired by the Markles, by Harry and Meghan, another person can't not manage to be around them because they're so mean, they're so hateful. The staff's unhappiness was transmitted to Jason Kanoff in London. Amid talk of humiliated officials weeping in a cerebral atmosphere, Kanoff finally sent the complaint to Simon Case, William's private secretary. In summary, Case read that Meghan had bullied 2 assistants and shattered the confidence of a third, promoting all 3 to leave Kensington Palace. The private secretary forwarded the memo to Samantha Carruthers, the head of human resources at Clarence House. But disappointingly, after reading it, she appears to have done nothing formal. 2 years later, the Sussexes' lawyers denied all the allegations and claimed that the staff resigned amid allegations of their own misconduct. So they just had to leave because of their own guilty consciences. Had nothing to do with us. We were always doing the right thing by our staff. I loved all those girls with so much tenderness, and it was disappointing when they chose to be such scoundrels and to really just be vile human beings. They did a lot of things that were really wrong, and so they did leave. They decided to leave once I held them to the standard that they needed to be held to. They were doing bad things. And when I pointed that out, they left. But I didn't bully them. I just asked them why they were such bad people. And it was their own disappointment in themselves that led them out the door. Showing no hint of the furor, Meghan smiled broadly during her entrance at her first state dinner at Fiji's Grand Pacific Hotel. Shimmering in a light blue ginkgo cape dress, everyone was struck by the glittering chopard diamond pendant earrings that she wore. Oh, goodness gracious, you guys. These earrings, I cannot even believe this. They wanted to know where these came from, who gifted these to her, because nobody had seen her wear them before. And her spokesperson said that they had been borrowed, although she didn't state from whom. They had not been borrowed. They had been given to her as a wedding present from the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. And Meghan had ignored her staff's warnings that wearing the jewels might be controversial. Yeah, might be, because 3 weeks earlier, the prince had approved the murder in Istanbul of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. I think that's how you say that. Isn't this a change from Meghan's earlier attitude when there was a hotel that had been booked for her by Gina Nelthorpe Cowan, and when Meghan found out that it was owned by some Saudi prince who had negative feelings about homosexuality, she decided that this wasn't a place she could stay. Remember that? But now she can run around wearing earrings gifted to her by somebody who not but 3 weeks earlier had somebody murdered. Meghan should have been shocked by the murder. Ever since meeting Loujain El Hathlal, a Saudi activist, at the One Young World Humanitarian Summit in Ottawa in October 2016, she'd known about the regime's cruelty. In her speech at the conference, Meghan acknowledged Loujain's protests against human rights violations and gender equality issues, discrimination and injustice in Saudi Arabia. Since that conference, Loujain had been jailed, tortured, and threatened with rape and death. Despite that link, Meghan would wear the earrings again on 14th November 2018 for Charles's 70th birthday party at Buckingham Palace. Meghan later claimed to have been unaware at the time of the global outrage about the prominent media reports that the prince had ordered the murder. Her lawyers denied to the Times that she had misled anyone about the provenance of the earrings. That is really unacceptable. That you could have a tie with somebody who had been tortured under this same prince's regime, that you had spoken to this person, that you had met them and had extensive conversation with them. Then in the years since, this person has been jailed, beaten, threatened with rape, and then your reaction is, but the earrings are so pretty though, right? How could you say you had no idea what had happened? Wouldn't you notice that in the media reports? This is a person who combs the media constantly. I mean, of course she's looking for her own name, but this just reeks of her narcissism. That you could go through life meeting really important and interesting people, then you find out that something terrible is happening to them, and you just are like, oh, is something going on there? Oh, but the earrings, look how glittery and pretty. I better never hear Meghan ever again say she's the smart one.